embroidered. How about some slick graphics on that hot ride to make you stand out from the crowd? Accelerated Graphics and Signs can handle anything you throw at them. Located at 101 East Renfro Street, Suite C in Burleson, Texas, go in and see them. Call them at 817-991-0523 or reach them on the web at www.acceleratedgraphics.net. They are loud and proud and want to serve you. Accelerated Graphics.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395, 800-709-4395.
Serving Johnson County, Texas. JOCO Community Radio.
Friend, you make me smile. Even if I only have you for a while, extend your open heart.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for joining us on JOCO Community Radio. My name is Callie Crow, and I will be your host on our new show, Drew's 27 Chains, One Mom's Mission to Save Lives and the Realities of the Opioid Crisis. Today, joining me in studio on our very first show is my son, Gabe. Hi, Gabe.
Hi.
Thanks for being here with me today to walk me through this very first show.
Of course, make it a little easier.
Yeah. So I want to tell you a little bit, our listeners, a little bit about Drew's 27 Chains and where it began and Drew's story. I founded Drew's 27 Chains just a little bit after losing my son, Drew. So Gabe's older brother, Drew. We lost him to a fentanyl overdose in June of 2020. Before I talk to you about his death, because that'll be a lot of what today's show is about, I would like to talk to you a little bit about his life. Drew was 27 years old. He was a student at the University of North Texas. He was studying political journalism. He was married. He was a brother to Gabe and his sister Maddie. And he was 6'4". He was a big boy and appeared very healthy from the outside. If you just looked at him, he was very articulate and charming. And when he spoke, everyone looked towards him because he had this like very white voice, right? And everyone was drawn to him. But when he was about 14 years old, he began using drugs. Now, I've never done a drug in my entire life. I've never even smoked pot before. I don't drink, I don't smoke. And so in my mind, it made my children exempt from becoming addicts or having substance use disorder. Now, the PC term is substance use disorder. You're going to hear me use the word addict. It's not to offend anyone. That's just the terminology that I personally use. But that journey began when he was 14 years old, and we were all on that journey with him. He became addicted when he was about 17. So Drew spent the last 10 years of his life addicted to opiates, and it held him hostage. On the night that he overdosed, I was working. I am a first responder. I'm a paramedic in the DFW area, and I had just come back from a call. I was laying in my bedroom at the station, and I got that phone call that no parent wants. It came from his wife, and she said to me, "Callie, they're doing CPR on Drew." You can imagine what that moment was like for me. And I don't really recall a whole lot about that night, but I do remember leaving and going to pick up my daughter, Maddie, and we went to the hospital where Gabe met us there as well. When I walked into the emergency room where Drew was at, he was still alive at that point, and he lived for 36 hours in the ICU. As I sat in the ICU with him, um, so many things went through my mind, but I began the grieving process, and um, I I knew or felt like I wasn't going to be able to make it, and I knew that I had to do something in order to make the next day happen for me. Like I mentioned earlier, Drew died 36 hours later, and during that time is when that grieving started, and the thoughts of how I can keep moving on, how I was going to still be a mother to my other two children, how I was still going to be a paramedic. All those things went through my mind. And after Drew passed away, um, the kids and I kind of came together and came up with Drew's 27 chains. I took off with it and started training and teaching the general public and first responders regarding recognizing opioid overdoses, and administering NARCAN or naloxone. Since then, I have taught throughout the state over 61 different classes, and over 20, almost 30 police departments in the area have received not only just the training for recognizing opioid overdoses and administering Narcan, but also received the Narcan medication itself, supplied by a federal grant that was given to the state of Texas. We'll be talking more about that grant, but that is where the supply came from, and that is where I have gotten the opportunity to give these police departments a life-saving medication. If you don't know about Narcan or naloxone, I would like to give you a little bit of education about that. Narcan is the brand name of a drug named naloxone, which is a medication that blocks the effects of opioids. And so when someone takes an opioid drug, it suppresses their central nervous system, which can affect their breathing and their consciousness level. If our breathing is affected to the point to where we don't breathe enough to get enough oxygen to our brain cells begin to die. Once those brain cells die, they don't communicate effectively to the heart, causing the heart to stop. And that's how people die from opioid overdoses. And Narcan is the medication that, if administered in time, it goes into those same receptors that the opioids attach to, blocks the effects of the opioids attaching themselves to those receptors. And you will see a person literally come back to life after receiving Narcan. The best thing about Narcan is, in the state of Texas in 2015, the Senate passed a bill allowing anyone in the state of Texas to have access and possess Narcan without a prescription. So it is a prescription medication, but anyone in the state of Texas can walk into a pharmacy and obtain it without that actual doctor's note. And that's what the Senate Bill 1462, if you'd like to look that up, that is what that Senate bill did, along with that embedded in that bill is laws that will also protect you. Similar to the Good Samaritan laws, these laws protect you for administering the Narcan, any adverse effects that happen after administering Narcan. However, or naloxone. However, there are not really any side effects or liability when it comes to this medication. If you give Narcan or naloxone in a situation in which the person is not experiencing an opioid overdose, this medication does absolutely nothing. There are zero side effects. If you administer it to someone who is in an opioid overdose situation, the side effects include breathing, right? We like that. The person will become awake and hopefully breathe on their own. We will have a separate show simply about naloxone and educating you about that. But that is the general overview of what Drew's 27 Chains does. Not only do we teach at police departments, volunteer fire departments, churches, bars, restaurants, schools. We have a couple of schools in the area that have our wall mounted kits, which contain NARCAN, up in their schools. So this show is going to be all about the opioid crisis, what I have experienced since I lost Drew, and all the things that I want to do by helping other families not experience what we have experienced as a family. Gabe, I would like to get back to you. I know that in the last year and a half, it's been sort of a readjustment for all of us. Drew was attending Texas Tech at the time of Drew's death, and I'm sorry, Gabe was attending Texas Tech at the time of Drew's death, and he has since come home. If you don't mind, talk a little bit about about you and Drew's relationship, and what this whole thing looked like for you, your perspective of what has gone on, and tell us where, how you feel about Drew's 27 Chains and what I'm doing, and just be open, and I will tell you, as our listeners, this, some of this can be pretty raw. So bear with us both. And we're no experts, by the way, on radio talk shows, but here we are. So Gabe, I'll give it up to you for a little bit.
Okay. Me and Drew's relationship was very interesting, just because we were 7 years apart. So there was a lot that, we didn't, there's just a lot of separation there. So, but we were actually talking a minute ago about how, how I saw the situation, and just not really understanding what was going on. Like you were saying, he was 14 when, really it started happening, and 17 when the full addiction kicked in. And at that time I was 7 and then 10. So just understanding all of that was not there for me. And we were talking about one of the times that he overdosed, and I was a little bit older at the time, and it was really the first time that I understood how serious the situation was. And it was very interesting, because that drive to the hospital, I knew it was serious, and I showed up, and he was different. It was really weird. I didn't know if it was because a lot of the situation, or a lot of the interactions that I'd had with him before, if he was on something, or just affected by it in some way. So I was seeing him for one of the first times, being older, where he wasn't on anything, and he was like, he didn't hug me that much. He wasn't much. I would force him to hug sometimes. And the first thing that he did when I saw him was he wanted a hug, and it was really.
And you're talking about, I didn't mention this earlier, but Drew actually overdosed a total of 4 times. So you're talking about that first overdose when we found him, right?
First,
yeah,
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
So he overdosed, and we took him. He went to the hospital, and you came up there,
Mhm.
and I think if I remember right, I pretty much told y'all that he wasn't going to walk out of the hospital that day, because he had been without oxygen for an extended period of time,
Mhm.
due to that overdose.
And I don't know. Would you how affected would you say that he was by that? The years after that, because I was so young, so
Yeah.
I felt like he was possibly different. After that, it just seemed like I don't know if it was that way before or not. It's hard to say because I was so young, but he seemed not like just not there as much. A lot more sad. Like just to put it in simple terms,
Right.
a lot more.
And I
Sad. I don't know
think
if it was
that,
the addiction increasing or the effects of the first overdose. I'm not really sure what it was.
yeah, there was definitely a change in Drew after that first overdose. I think it became more of a reality for him that he knew of the situation that he was in. And that
that he
is
was an addict at
right.
that point.
Yeah.
Not
And
in
you couldn't deny it at that
yeah.
point. Yeah, maybe that's it. And that's another thing that we are going to touch on different shows is talking about what addiction looks like. And, you know,
Yeah,
what,
it's so different than what it's such a bad word. It sounds like a bad word when you say it, like saying that somebody's an addict, but it's one thing that I hope comes from this is like that understanding that there's a lot of people out there in the exact same situation.
yeah,
And maybe
because when
some
you
things
say
that
the word addict, we all kind of get this like stereotypical image in our head, right?
Mhm,
And those things that I described to you about Drew don't really fit that stereotypical image,
not at
right?
all. And that's something that we were talking about earlier, just kind of brainstorming some stuff. It's like you probably know an addict.
Right. No,
Somebody
you
that you know
mhm,
is most like just looking at statistics, you probably do out of the amount of people that you know and the amount of people that are actually addicts that you don't know.
right. And another thing a topic that I want to bring up about that is, what does an addict look like, right? And we all make an assumption of how that person got in that position. And as a first responder, that's really easy for us to do, right? So we go out on a call and we see someone who is addicted to drugs. Maybe we deal with them on a routine basis. And I make an assumption of where they got to that point. And usually that assumption comes from, well, they were just out partying and wanted to
Mhm.
get high. And that's not the truth at all. Some people start their addiction journey, if you will, from a legitimate prescription that they received from a doctor. And those two addicts are not much different. They're still dealing with the same types of things.
Right. And something that I've heard from a lot of addicts is they say, I made one mistake and now I'm living my life, and they hate it.
Right.
It's just so many misconceptions about being an addict and drug abuse and addiction. And hopefully we can, spread some light on like what it really is and how common it actually is. Just, and then how it affects like the people around you. Cause obviously we have a very close interaction with it and all the way through a 10-year process. And then eventually, the loss of that battle. So I just,
Yeah. So like you were saying, the misconceptions that are surrounded with addicts in general. People think that they are non-functional. People think that they can't hold a job. People think that they can't go to school and seem very normal, and that's false, right? Because there was plenty of times that a lot of us weren't really sure if Drew was using or not using.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, but it was also 10 years of him using and it changed him, right? Describing Drew as a child is a much different description as an adult. And yeah, that's pretty much true for most people, but this is a complete personality change. We lost him a long time ago, and my grieving as a mother began a long time ago. Like I have said before, we're going to do a ton of shows, and I'll have that outlined on our Facebook page, which I'll give you that information here in just a little bit. But we are going to talk about so many different topics regarding opioid addiction, the crisis, what it looks like in the first responder world for me and my perspective coming from that end of that perspective, and then as a mother who has lost a son. We're going to touch on NARCAN even more and talk about specifics of how you can get NARCAN, how you can get training for NARCAN, how you can get NARCAN in the police department of the city that you live in. And let me touch on that real quick as well. Police officers commonly carry naloxone or NARCAN on them, because a lot of times they are first on scene to a 911 call that comes in to a possible overdose, especially in the outlying communities. A police officer or law enforcement officer will be first on scene before EMS arrives. And it takes only 4 minutes for the brain to begin to die without oxygen. And if you know anything about EMS or law enforcement response times, you know that 4 minutes is sort of unheard of, especially if you live out in the outlying communities. Response times can be 20 to 30 minutes sometimes, and that can change a person's life. So if a responder, a police officer, or volunteer fire department shows up on scene and they are equipped with the NARCAN, they can make a difference between someone living and someone not making it by the time EMS arrives. So we will do a specific show about that as well. We've got just a few minutes before the break, and Gabe, I think we kind of trailed off and went sort of down a rabbit hole, but what else did you want to say about your perception of what was happening? When was the first time that was that the first time that you realized something was seriously wrong?
Yeah, I think so. When I think back on it, there was always those times in middle school, even like, before the first overdose. And I think that time it was like, I just kind of didn't, I didn't think of it as really like bad drugs, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I thought he was just, like a teenager, and I knew other friends that, like smoked marijuana and all that stuff. So I thought it was kind of just along those lines. And it's, it just wasn't. I didn't understand that. But something I'd like to do is backtrack onto like talking about Drew basically. So, I mean, the reason that all of this started, and, give a little, information on him, because it's just, you just don't think that he would be an addict if you met him ever. You would never think that. He's just so like he's just smart. He's just a really smart guy, and I feel like I could talk about him.
Yeah, so yeah, I want to insert something that was kind of funny that's been on my mind the last couple of weeks. So, um, we were having a little slumber party at my house. Now that I have children that are outside the house, I'm sort of at a loss, right? So I'm an empty nester, and Gabe and Maddie both were at the house a couple of weeks ago, and we literally all piled in my bed and watched Shrek. And as we were watching Shrek, and by the way, it's probably the first time that Gabe has watched it as an adult. And so he was catching on to all of those things that are on there, and they're funny to adults and not to kids. And so it was kind of like watching for the first time for him. But if you can imagine, um, or remember how Shrek and Donkey's relationship was, that is very much Gabe and Drew. Drew being Shrek and Gabe being Donkey. And so it was fun and sad at the same time as we were watching that, right?
Yeah.
Because we began to recall your relationship with Drew and what that was like.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another good way to represent it, is like it's I always looked up to him, and I always wanted to be like him and do, like little brothers do to big brothers, I guess. And so to see, where it went from there, like I always looked up to him. And so like it didn't matter when, like I always wanted to, make him happy, and um, be like him and be cool like he was. And so to see like certain situations where he, was maybe like, down, um, and, you know, just, I don't know how to explain it, but the life of an addict. And I just remember like a story when we were at the house, and me and Drew were Drew was supposed to come with me. We were doing something, and we were hanging out, and he was standing there, and he was falling asleep, like standing up. And I was trying to have a conversation with him, and he was like talking to me while falling asleep, and I just I just didn't know how to handle that and how to process that, because I loved I loved him and I looked up to him, and he was like a superstar to me. And so like growing up and seeing those situations was really hard. Um, you know, and like
Yeah,
it's
it's hard to watch. It was hard to watch that transition. It was kind of like a slow death almost, until the day that he actually died. And so Gabe and I both, and my daughter Maddie, are taking this situation and hoping to help other families. And whatever we can do to do that, we would be more than happy to do so. The first thing, of course, that I have been doing is educating about how to block the effects of the overdose if it does happen, with opioids, and trying to get you some Narcan in your hands. Um, but I want to spread the awareness about addiction, and how you as an individual, if you have experienced addiction, whether that be firsthand or a family member, how you sharing your story can help other people realize that they're not alone. And that was one of my biggest feelings when Drew was really in active addiction and struggling, was I felt very alone. And I know he did as well. There's not as many resources out there as you think that there are. We're about to head into break, but when we get back, I would like to talk about the organization Drew's 27 Chains as a whole, what that looks like, what our plans are, what our goals are, and what we have been up to for the last few months. I'm hoping to be able to play a video of a interview that I did for a Austin news station. Hopefully I can get that queued up and ready to go. If not, we will definitely talk about all the different outlets that I have used to spread the word and spread the awareness and help other families. So please come back. We'll see you back here in just a couple of minutes, and we'll get started.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Out-of-date carpet giving you the blues? Tired of your old dingy and broken tile? Let my friends at the Floor Store in Cleburne, Texas give your home the makeover it deserves. This is Old Taco Joe coming to you for the Floor Store. Whether it's carpet, tile, wood flooring, or real wood laminate, the Floor Store can cover all of your flooring needs. Located at 405 West Henderson Street in Cleburne, Texas, owner Brent Harris can help. Shower tile, tub surrounds, even backsplashes. Give them a call today at 817-641-9444. The Floor Store, they got you covered.
When you're hungry for tender brisket or some delicious homemade cobbler, then look no further than Leach Brothers Barbecue, located at 1106 East Henderson in Cleburne, Texas. Leach Brothers has been family owned and operated since 1950. Take it from me, Taco Joe Orwinski. Todd and his family have been filling my belly breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a long time. Heck, I even have my own booth, open Monday through Saturday, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Come see them for dine-in, carry-out, and all your catering needs.
Serving Johnson County, Texas, Joco Community Radio.
Friend, you make me smile. Even if I only have you for a while.
Welcome back to Drew's 27 Chains. Joco Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 365 on the TuneIn Radio Network. To listen or watch, simply go to tuneinjoco.com to choose where and how. The Joco Community Radio app is now available for free on Android and iOS devices. Simply search your store. Check out our lineup and more on jococommunityradio.com. This episode and more brought to you by Patriot Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your Texas sales rep, Nona Reed, at 844-TEX-HAIL, 844-839-4245. Thanks for coming back, y'all. And my name is Callie Crow, and I am the founder of Drew's 27 Chains. In studio with me today is my youngest son, Gabe, and we have this is our very first show. And during break, Gabe and I were talking about how very much scattered the first part of this show was, and we apologize. We have a huge passion and we have so much information that we want to get out and tell you about. So we do both apologize for being sort of everywhere. But I do want to kind of recap a little bit after we play a video that hopefully is up and running. Let me double check and make sure we're good. I can't tell.
Drugs laced with fentanyl. Earlier this month, KXAN reported that there were 3 overdose deaths and at least a dozen hospitalizations during a 48-hour period right before South by Southwest. As deaths caused by fentanyl increase across central Texas, a life-saving medication has become hard to get. NARCAN is a brand name for naloxone and an emergency treatment used to reverse an opioid overdose. As KXAN investigator Arzo Dost explained, some organizations say they can't even get it anymore through a federally funded program.
It used to be a click away. You could order NARCAN, a nasal spray form of naloxone used to reverse opioid overdoses, for free in Texas.
You're about to save a life. Peel open the package to remove the NARCAN device. You seriously can't mess this up. Just pretend it's allergy nose spray.
The More NARCAN Please program, operated by the UT Health San Antonio School of Nursing, provides the life-saving medication, along with training on how to use it. But now when you go to the website, it says, we're experiencing delays due to high demand and funding, and are not accepting any new naloxone requests.
Are you having trouble finding it?
Yes, absolutely. I have 0 NARCAN right now. Which is a huge difference from, let's say, a year ago.
Callie Crow is a paramedic just outside of Fort Worth. She travels across the state and trains first responders and police departments on how to use NARCAN. Since last October, she's worked with almost 60 departments.
I had already scheduled multiple departments up until, this summer. And I had to cancel all of those because I don't have the NARCAN to supply for them, and they don't have anywhere to get it either.
Crow says the training has become therapy for her. She started doing it after she says her son Drew died from a fentanyl overdose in June of 2020. It's when she started her organization called Drew's 27 Chains.
It's kind of pointless for me to do this training if I cannot leave that NARCAN behind.
Crow says she hasn't been able to get the medication since last August. The Texas Health and Human Services Commission, which oversees the federal funding for the distribution program, says high demand and low supply has led to using all available funding. The state agency says funding fell to $4.6 million during the last funding year, a 22% decrease from the year before, when $5.9 million went to the program statewide. It added, though there's been less funding, the state did not reduce the expected amount of naloxone to be distributed.
This is what the NARCAN you order from our website will look like.
Right now, the state says it's working with organizations to redistribute their unused naloxone, and so far have been able to get about 1,400 to 1,600 doses.
There's lives to be saved, and they can't be because we don't have it in our hands.
Crow says through her training, 19 lives have been saved across the state. She worries what the shortage could mean on saving more Texans.
It's so disheartening to answer phone calls all day long and say, I don't have it either. And it's sad because every time I say that, I see Drew's face. I see, that's another Drew, and they won't be able to have the opportunity to live and get better.
Arzo Dost, KXAN investigates.
The More Narcan Please website says you can get naloxone at all CVS pharmacy and Walgreens locations. Crow says any pharmacist can distribute naloxone through a standing order, which has to be signed by a physician. But she says not all pharmacists know enough about it, and many people haven't been able to get it. Last week, UT Austin started providing naloxone at the Perry Castaneda campus, library on campus, and for years had it on hand at all on-campus residence halls. A spokesperson says the university now has a little over 200 doses of the nasal spray right now. In 2019, a statewide grant program was created to help law enforcement get the life-saving medication, but a KXAN investigation found that few Texas police departments actually applied for the money. To explore this investigation, as well as our coverage on the opioid crisis, just head over to KXAN.com and click on this story.
So that was a show, or the news report that aired on Sunday night, thanks to KXAN out of Austin. And they did a great job of representing a current problem that we have, which is actually getting our hands on the NARCAN, the grant-funded NARCAN. It's not a supply issue. It is a funding issue. NARCAN is still available. If you walk into a pharmacy to get it, you won't have to worry about them not having some. It is just a grant-funded NARCAN. That is a shortage. So I just wanted to make that a little bit clear.
So whenever you say it's not a supply issue and it's a grant issue, like what is that? What does that mean exactly?
So the state received a federal grant that allowed them to help combat the opioid crisis. That grant was given to the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio. And originally they were using that money to do lots of different things, but one of those things was purchasing naloxone and NARCAN and supplying basically the entire state with those two drugs. And some funding issues started to happen last year. They were unable to fund that particular portion of the program. Therefore, that left all of us without it in our hands. So it's out there. It's a matter of, do you have the money to pay for it? And so if you walk into a pharmacy and let's say you purchase it, you're going to get 2 doses of a nasal spray of the NARCAN. It'll cost you right off the shelf at about $180 for 2 doses. You can get that down to about $90 with a GoodRx or prescription discount card. Right now, NARCAN is actually offering it to police departments and first responders and organizations such as Drew's 27 Chains for $70 a box. However, that is a huge obstacle for me. We are a nonprofit, and our funding doesn't flow in. It has been basically self-funded with family and donations over the last year and a half. And so to have to add an extra cost of purchasing the Narcan to give to people and police departments, fire departments, first responders, that's an impossible task for me at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the biggest things about Drew's 27 Chains is like having no excuses on not having Narcan and not being able to use Narcan.
Right. Because it's such a simple thing. Anyone can use it.
Yeah. If you're like, I'm going to send it to you for free, here, like, take it. That's how it was before. And now nobody has any excuses. And that's, you can't be like, oh, I can't afford it and I can't have it. But now they're making you pay for it. So you can't send it out as much.
Right.
And people, I mean,
so basically people are dying. I mean, that's the bottom line. Because during my trainings that I've done over the last few months, I get responses from those trainings, whether it be from the actual police officers or the families that say that Narcan and that training that you supplied saved my son's life, my daughter's life, my friend's life. And so when I get those phone calls, it makes all of the hard work worth it. And I can't imagine those phone calls not coming in. And so as the supply has dropped back and my trainings have also, had to be canceled, those phone calls are much less than they were before. I'm not getting that response anymore. And so it makes me very sad to know that person that could possibly still be here with us and be getting treatment and getting better can't be because that Narcan or naloxone was not available.
Right. And one of the biggest things about it is like you're saying, like it's a direct impact. If you can't get it, people don't have it. I mean, that's really just that simple. And $70 regardless is $70. And so it's $70 for one pack, which comes with two, but that's one pack. And you could send that out to one person. That will make a big difference. But
right, is somebody's life
worth
$70? Absolutely.
Exactly.
I mean, that's sad that we have to put a price on someone's life. And it's every single day. I wonder, what mother is crying right now because she wasn't able to, she didn't know anything about it. And that's another thing. That's one of the biggest reasons why I started Drew's 27 Chains as well. Even having the medical experience that I did and dealing with Drew for 10 years in active addiction, I had no idea that the layperson, anyone, could get a hold of naloxone and administer it. I had no idea. So if I didn't know, I knew there were lots of people that didn't know.
Exactly.
And so that's where my mission started, of getting that word out there and hey, here's a tool. You can actually save someone's life. It may not be a person that you know necessarily, because I get a lot of things. Oh, I don't need to know anything about that. I'm not around that. Right. Well, actually you are around that. And, if you go to a gas station or a restaurant or a bar of any kind, you are around it. You are exposed to people who may be in an overdose emergency situation. Let me give you an example. If you walk into a gas station and you find a young lady on the floor, you have no idea what's wrong with her. Right. There's no one around to tell you if she has a medical history, a seizure disorder, or diabetic disorder. You don't know. And that's one of the greatest things about naloxone, is that if you give it and it's not an emergency overdose situation, it doesn't do anything to hurt them.
Right. And another thing, if I know right, and we actually have a question about it, is this asked, what would you tell law enforcement that has the Narcan, but it's past the expiration date?
Yeah.
Is like other medicine. I think there was a situation where somebody had Narcan 20 years past its expiration date.
Right.
Used it, and it worked.
Yeah. There was zero, it had lost zero effectiveness. So that's a great question. So the question reads, did you read it out loud? I'm sorry, I missed it. It says, Callie, would you tell law would you tell law enforcement that has Narcan, but it's past the expiration date? Which is an amazing question, because that's a lot of the situations that are happening right now. And just a few years ago, the same people that supplied me with the Narcan sent out pallets, literally, of naloxone and Narcan to local police departments. And unfortunately, there weren't already policies in place. The training wasn't already in place. And so a lot of these places have Narcan that's sitting on their shelves in their warehouses that has expired. And like Gabe said, so there was actually a research that was done, a study that was done, and Narcan is completely effective even after 30 years. They used a 30-year-old Narcan and it did not lose effectiveness. So it's just like anything.
perfect. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes way past the expiration date. You can use it on anybody. It's not going to harm anybody, and it helps bring somebody back to life.
Right.
And we can't get it.
Right. We can't get it. And there are a bunch of expired medications that are out there. It's just like any other thing that has expiration dates. On the ambulance, we have Band-Aids that have expiration dates. Do they still fix boo-boos? Absolutely, right? So Narcan is not any different. You can still use an expired Narcan. Absolutely. Unfortunately, I can't give those boxes of expired Narcan to places that have regulations, such as police departments, fire and volunteer fire departments, and things like that. If you were an individual person, and there are no regulations with you, and you would like a box of Narcan, I have it for you. It's expired. Like I said, it still works. There's nothing, absolutely zero things wrong with it. I will send you the study so you can look at it. So great question. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because right now, especially, it's a very valid point, considering that we can't get a new shipment without, but we have the expired Narcan. So yeah, really good. Very good. Like I was talking about earlier, I apologize for being all over the place, but you can tell that we have so much information to give. A lot of this information is on our Facebook page, Drew's 27 Chains. You can contact me directly, Drew's27chains@gmail.com. I will answer every single email that I get. I always do. I will be happy to talk with you about any questions that you might have. If you would like to share your story, you have a personal story about a save with Narcan, or a family member that's dealing with addiction right now, I will be more than happy to be a listening ear, or get you some resources. I will dig whatever I can do to help you. I am more than willing to do so. I would like to go back to talking about Drew's 27 Chains and giving you some more information about what we do. We've got just a little under 9 minutes left for our show. And so I have so much I want to tell you, and I know I'm not going to get it all in, but we are a nonprofit organization. I am working on my 501c3 at this point. It's supposed to be checked off by the IRS at any moment. And with that, my hopes are to get corporate sponsors, to get some grants, get some things going, so that Drew's 27 Chains can reach any and everyone that needs this.
So I don't know if you know any information about this, but so how the grants are affecting Narcan, do you know if that would be affecting, like, once you're able to accept those grants and get those grants, do you think that that would affect you too?
Yeah, so I don't know a whole lot about grants. I've been a paramedic my whole life. I don't know a lot about business and grant writing. If you would have told me a couple of years ago or asked me any questions about that, I would have had no idea what you were talking about. So I have very limited knowledge on that, which has been difficult. So I know that there are grants out there that are specifically to help nonprofit organizations get education out, and they give you the money and then allow you to use that towards whatever your mission or goal is. Unfortunately, right now, I am so busy, wrapped up in just everyday life working to survive. I still work on the ambulance. I still teach EMT school. And then I also am trying to get this organization up and running and still try to be a pretty good mom every once in a while. So I have so much going on that I don't even really know what to do, right? Like, I don't know, should I take a break and learn all about grants and how to write them? Do I reach out for help? There's a lot of questions and a lot of things that I want to do, and I just can't quite get to them.
Yeah. And just a personal look, it's sometimes it's hard to catch mom at home. Like I'll get a text or text her and she's like, "Oh, I'm actually in Houston right now," or like really far away doing a thing. And she's like, "But I'll be back tonight." And it's
Yeah.
like she left that morning, drive all the way back, and then go to work the next day for 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you even recognizing that. So, but he's right. I travel all over the state. My presentations are 1 hour. In that, I give a synopsis of Drew and his life. I talk about addiction. I talk about the basics of recognizing opioid overdoses, and I talk about how to administer Narcan, which is so simple. It is a spray up the nose, very similar to an allergy medication. And you can't hurt anyone, right? So there are lots of myths out there and misconceptions about Narcan and naloxone. I encourage you to do some research and get some information about it. If you contact me, I will be happy to send you some information and some videos on how to use it. I will come and meet with your group, whatever that group may be, whether it be you own a restaurant or a bar and you want to educate your employees and hang up one of our wall-mounted kits that has Narcan in it in your restaurant or bar, whether you're a church, a school, police department, volunteer fire department, whoever and whenever, I will be happy to get those things scheduled. I will try my hardest to round up some Narcan for you and have that available. We are hoping that the state will come through with some extra funding and be able to supply us with some grant-funded Narcan, because right now everyone is at a standstill, and I just wonder how many people are going to die while we're waiting.
Wow.
Yeah.
To kind of bounce off of those two things, with a little bit of time we have left, disregarding the shortage of Narcan, what are the goals of Drew's 27 Chains? Like, where do you want to see it in 5 years?
Yeah. So my ultimate goal is to get the education out there and the awareness of, hey, this is an issue, but guess what? You can do something about it. And you as an individual, no matter who you are, non-medical, medical, law enforcement, non-law enforcement, you can change someone's life simply by spraying something up their nose, recognizing it, getting help, and spraying Narcan up their nose can literally save someone's life. And I want that awareness. I want to be able to walk up to anyone on the street and say, "Hey, have you ever heard of Narcan before?" and not get looked at like I'm crazy, right?
Yeah, or even having to ask somebody what Narcan is, considering how big of a crisis opioids are.
You would think they would know, right?
Yeah. Like, there's some crazy stats out there. Like, I think there was a video that we watched, and last year there were more opioid deaths than the Vietnam War.
So I can't remember. Yes. So I don't remember the exact number, so I don't want to
Something,
throw those out
yeah,
there.
yeah.
But by those numbers, which I hate numbers, I think everybody hates numbers after COVID. And honestly, they're not overly accurate. But according to the CDC, over 102,000 people died in 2020. I'm sorry, from April 2020 to April of 21, over 102,000 people died from overdose. 80% of those involved opioids. But let me tell you that those numbers are much greater than that. A lot of them are missed.
That's horrible.
And I want to also tell you that these are not necessarily, this can affect a large group of people. Okay. I want you to imagine a little 5-year-old girl, and she has a 16-year-old sister, and she wants to be like her 16-year-old sister. And so she goes and digs in her backpack and she finds a package of gummies or gummy bears, right? But what they actually are some fentanyl laced edibles. And she takes that package and she goes in the bathroom and she consumes it. Her mom is cooking dinner, so she doesn't want mom to know she's snacking. Mom goes and looks for her. She knocks on the door of the bathroom, but she can only hear the little girl making some strange noises on the other side. She finally gets the door open and finds her little 5-year-old girl unresponsive. She calls 911. The paramedics arrive. They take her to the hospital and she dies 5 days later. Her cause of death was listed as pneumonia, aspiration pneumonia. It wasn't listed as an overdose. And so those are the numbers that are being missed. Those are the people that it's also affecting. So unintentional. Okay. So a 2-year-old gets into mom and dad's prescription medication. Or at the other end of the spectrum, you've got an 89-year-old who takes multiple medications and she inadvertently overdoses herself, right? Because she can't see very good. She has dementia, all the things,
Right.
right?
So those numbers are huge and should be looked at. So the goal with Drew's 27 Chains is like, this is a huge deal, and we need everybody to know how to, handle
Right.
that, or, even on the backside, not looking at addiction and fighting addiction, just looking at saving
Right.
the addict's life, or not even an addict, like you're saying, like
Right. Anyone.
anybody.
Yeah.
So
Just an emergency situation
so
and
just
how to save
so
it.
that goal of just getting that information out there
Yeah, absolutely. And so
across the whole U.S.
everyone.
everywhere.
So that ultimately is my goal, is getting people the awareness out there, helping them understand that they can make a difference in someone's life, and giving them a little bit of control and power over someone in their life that is addicted. It's a very powerless feeling. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Gabe, for helping me today and being here with me. I couldn't have done it without you. Next week will be an actual replay of this show, but the following week and every Wednesday after that, we will be right here discussing these topics and more. I'm hoping to have it a little bit more structured, but thank you guys so much for listening. You are listening to JoCo Community Radio, Drew's 27 Chains, one mom's mission to save lives and the realities of opiate crisis.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, JoCo Community Radio.